see.
Yep, they're all set too.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Douglas Kellner, co-chair, and I call the meeting to order. I ask the other commissioners to introduce
I'm
themselves.
Peter Kosinski.
Gregory Peterson.
The first item on our agenda is, as the Board of Canvassers, the amended certification of election results for the April 19th special election in the 59th Assembly District. Why are we amending the results?
There was an amendment. There wasn't much of an amendment from the City Board of Elections to the 59th Assembly District. I don't know why.
The City Board sent us
City
an
Board
amended
sent us an amended
certification, so we have to amend the state certification.
Sorry. Here's your official pens.
Everyone is in agreement?
Did it change the results at all?
No.
Same people. It was minor numbers that changed.
Okay.
Your official signing pen.
This would be official signing.
Didn't.
That's in the receiving note. You'd be the last one to sign.
Just the one?
Yes,
I guess we already sent them the certificate of election.
we did.
You were here.
All right, so then we proceed to the regular meeting of the Commissioners of the State Board of Elections. First item on
If
the
I
agenda.
can just
I'm sorry.
interject at this time, I'm sorry. Before we start the meeting, just as a remembrance of a fine gentleman who served so many years on this board, matter of fact, twice, Jim Walsh passed away just recently after an illness. And I served on this board with him for the 7 years I've been here. And one word can describe him, that is gentleman. He was a gentleman in every sense of the word. If you had a difference with him, he never raised his voice, but he always made his feelings known, and he was up front with everything. He was an honorable man. And sometimes in this business, and especially the business of politics, which he was involved in all his life, that's a high compliment for anybody that's involved in a business to be able to say that. But he was, in every respect, that he needed that title, honorable, in front of him, because I really described him. And it was a delight working with him. Every time I came up here, I look forward to seeing him. He'll be greatly missed by those who know him.
Well, I second your comments that he was a credit to our agency, and I also found that it was a privilege to work with Jim Walsh, because he did have high principles and stuck to them.
In that same vein, I'd like to mention also we lost Tom Wallace in the last month. Since our last meeting, Tom was here for many years. I happen to know, I don't know how many people here actually knew Tom. He left here a long time ago, but he was the original executive director of the state board. And he hired me back in 1990. Another great guy, very honest, honorable, well-respected person in the election community for a lot of years. He was the original executive director and lasted from 1974, when this agency was created, until 1992. It was a long tenure, and he served very honorably as well. So Tom passed in the last month as well, and for those who remember him and those who don't, I'd just like to mention that as well.
I didn't get a chance to know Jim. He had like 3 meetings with him. But in those 3 meetings, he certainly exhibited those qualities.
Real gentleman.
Yeah, he was. I knew Jim as well and served here with Jim. And I think Jim had 2 tenures here at the board.
Yeah.
He actually served, I think, in the mid-90s, then got off and came back in the 2000s. And I had the privilege of serving with him back then as well. Jim was all of that.
So we pause for a moment of silence in memory of Jim Walsh and Tom Wallace. All right, well, thank you very much. All right, right, so then we'll go to our agenda. The first item is approval of the minutes of May 4th, 2016. Is there a motion?
So
So, second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. We'll go on with the unit updates. Our co-executive directors, Robert Brehm and Todd Valentine.
We have the good fortune to give a few reports. I don't know how you'll want them. We were giving the IT report also, and with John being sick and Tom having an appointment outside the building, we're also giving the NVRA PIO report. So we can do it all
You
at
can have
once.
ours too if you want.
If you'd like. A number of items that we've been working on for the agenda and getting ready for petition filing this week. I think we've had some, we the agency had gone to New York City on June 20th to meet with them to review the voter list maintenance issues. They had just restored the Brooklyn people that had, in their view, been inappropriately purged. We continue to monitor what they're doing. This would be the third week that we have over the weekend done the synchronization of our systems. We did pick up their list maintenance procedures, review them. We need to get back to them with any comments that we have about them, and I think there'll be some. But mostly, we need to work, I think, with regard to the ongoing audit that we do, also to be able to see where things are not gelling the way we expect them to. The audit that we did have wouldn't have picked up these items in this instance. So, one, we want to make sure that we all understand and have an understanding that the inappropriate purge won't be continued, and that we also look at additional reporting elements that we need to develop, and we're working in-house to find a better way to do that so we could add them to our audit to make sure that we detect earlier if something is not happening as appropriate. So one, whoever was inappropriately removed, we worked with them to make sure that those names were restored early enough in the process, because it would be, with the June primary, with petitioning, it would just continue to be a problem in other parts of the election administration world. So those steps had happened, and we continue to work to make sure that the ability, and the city had turned off, informed us that they had turned off the ability of the staff to have made the ad hoc purges in the first place. So at least we think we're at a good temporary, while we continue to review and monitor the long-term picture with them. And certainly we do a synchronization of a forced synchronization of the system every weekend. On Tuesday, the state board gives a report to the city board as to what the counts are, so that it could review to see if for whatever reason they think that the counts are not what they should be. So at least that will be going forward to make sure that we stay in sync.
And just to jump in on that, might as well say it now, that the Department of Justice attorneys will be here on Thursday here in this building to discuss that issue with the state board as well.
So that was our meeting with them on the 20th. I thought it was a very helpful meeting. We talked about a number of items with the city. One of them was the NCOA changes, but also we talked a little bit about the annual mail check. Friday, Todd and I had a follow-up call with them on the mail check issue. The statute was changed. I think it's Chapter 44 of the laws of this year. It was one of the 3 chapters that was signed at the beginning of the year.
Right, that allows them to take advantage of lower postal rates because it no longer requires a specific statutory endorsement. They're allowed to use an endorsement that's equivalent to that so that they get the returned mail. But by changing the statutory language, it allows them to take advantage, if it's economically feasible, of a nonprofit status rate. So it's cheaper to send out, but it can cost you more coming back. So that's what we went over the city board with, so they can look at that analysis, whether it's cost effective for them. A few boards take advantage of it, but this was the first time they were looking at it.
When NVRA was adopted, National Voter Registration Act, it allowed for nonprofit mail. Our statute required first-class mail, so there really weren't a lot of economic incentives to use the nonprofit for county boards. In statute was language that required first-class mail for the annual mail check card to go out, and an endorsement that would, one, make it not forwardable, and two, that there would be return information to the boards of election to do list maintenance. There is a category under the nonprofit of an endorsement. Well, first of all, the U.S. Postal Service no longer uses the statutorily required endorsement. So a county board couldn't comply with the law without it being changed.
What's this endorsement you're referring to?
Well, it's the word that you put on the document, so it tells the post office how to handle it.
Do not forward, return service requested.
So that's in our statute, but the post office no longer recognizes those words to mean anything?
They haven't used it in their manuals for years. They've been treating it as such, but under the statute, it didn't jive with the actual postal service requirements.
So the proposal that we had made, it was our program, Bill 16 this year. The legislature adopted it, the governor signed it, and it took that word out, but it required that we identify, we the state board, the equivalent of it. So we provided the equivalent word to the boards of elections to what is non-forwardable that would return that. I have to say, unfortunately, I didn't bring that.
So the point here, as I understand, is to make sure that if they send a mail check to the voter and the voter's moved, it doesn't get forwarded to their new address. It gets kicked back to the board, and so now the board is informed this voter has moved.
It still gives the board, the item that's different under the law, and it might not make sense for every county to use the program. If you mail out first class a postcard, I don't know the postcard rate, say it goes 30 cents as a postcard rate. It's not forwardable with the endorsement, correct endorsement, and for free the county boards get back the information. No forwarding order on record, here they've moved, here's an address. So it costs more to go out, free to come back. Under the nonprofit, it costs less to go out, but you pay a premium for everything that comes back. The city's estimate to us on Friday was it would save $500,000 paying all the cards to go out at the cheaper rate and the higher premium for everything that comes back. And that's the same. I think 23 counties have indicated to us in one way or another that they're looking to do that this year. So it will allow the list maintenance that's required by the statute to continue and the counties to get a little bit of savings and the notices to go out. So that, we continue to monitor, look to see if we've had that positive effect to allow the notice to go out under the way the post office processes it and have a substantial savings to the counties that they can use for other purposes. One other item, yesterday I was, I guess, the only non-lawyer to get to go to federal court yesterday because I was the one who signed the affidavit for the Attorney General's staff that was representing us in the Libertarian court case, Merced v. Spano, and it was a hearing on the preliminary injunction. John Schwartz and Eva Dietz for the Attorney General's office represented us. I thought John did a great job making the argument of the election process being well underway and for this to be a last-minute change that will create a significant disruption to the election process.
So you got to explain a little bit about what the case is
The case for Libertarian is they want to have the requirement that a witness to a designating petition in New York be a registered voter in New York State. They want them to be to remove that from statute.
Is this a designating petition or an independent petition?
Independent petition.
Independent petition.
They want to do away with that requirement.
They want to have it.
They
go.
argue that the residency requirement for petition witnesses is unconstitutional.
So they wanted out-of-state circulators to be allowed.
This would not affect designating petitions, only independent petitions?
I believe it was only 6140 of the election law that they were asking for the challenge to be ruled. But that would be both federal and state independent petitions. So the judge reserved yesterday, and I did not need to testify, but I was available should that need to happen.
Are independent petitions out?
Yes.
Today is the first day for state and local independent circulation, and we're in the middle of the federal petition. It started June 26th.
21 or 22.
Oh, sorry.
It's the 21st.
So we're in the midst of the congressional petitions being out and the state petitions just started.
The federal petitions are due back on August 2nd, so I think of the 6-week period, we're right about the midway.
And then the state ones are due August
15, 20 something,
23rd.
20th or something, okay. Okay.
6 weeks from today.
Who's this in front of?
It was Judge Johnson. I don't know his
Is it
first
here in
name.
Albany?
No, it was
Sterling
federal.
Johnson.
Brooklyn.
Federal
Oh,
court,
Brooklyn
Brooklyn.
District. Gotcha.
Also, I had the opportunity to go down June 28th for the federal primary to view the polling sites. I made it to 16 sites within Brooklyn, Bronx, and Harlem, and get back here for the end of day election results. So I thought that was an accomplishment. And it was nice because the city board had hired a group to update their training manual and to also do a different training program for all of the inspectors. So I kind of wanted to look at, from my perspective, how well was that working. And the training manual literally has how to set out the poll site, where on the table to put things. And it was not a very busy primary for me. I had started about 6 o'clock in the morning about 6:30 at the first site, and I ended about 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Harlem. That's where by then a lot of people had shown up. But literally everybody had the book out, and the tables were set up properly. There was only one site that I didn't think had the signage 100% right, but it was the last day of school, and they were adjusting the entrance to the building because all the students were on one side and the other, so they were just catching up with the signage by the time I got there. But in general, there was only one area where an interpreter didn't show up in one of the Asian languages, and another site where the Spanish language interpreter didn't show up, but one of the inspectors was filling in double duty because they could interpret for the voter. The only problem was that was a site that was starting to really get busy, so I at least forwarded their request to try and get a replacement, but they didn't have any replacements. They had used all the replacement translators by then. But other than that, I thought it was an interesting step to observe how the new training and the use of the new booklet. I still am very concerned. There were some sites that had an A through L, M to Z sign-in poll book, but the majority of the sites I visited had A to Z, and maybe that works in a low-volume primary, but it would have been a good test, I think, to have done A to L, M to Z in a low-volume
You know
primary.
what the turnouts were at those primaries, by the way?
I don't have the final number.
You don't have those yet?
Because I did not have the enrollment from where I picked. I tried to geographically look to where I could get to all 3 sites and still get the 2 o'clock train back. But I thought clearly from the sites to be able to break the book up in half would allow them to handle more voters in a given period of time. And having not gone there yet, I get nervous about the fall where there will be so many additional people. So I hope that they will continue to look to see where they can put the teams of, they have teams of 2, a Democrat and a Republican on each book. So they need to identify those additional resources to have those inspectors and the room within the sites. Most of the sites I visited out of the 16 were big enough to handle that kind of volume. Several of them, as I ended in Harlem, were very small sites. Some of them in the Bronx would be difficult to add many more people to those rooms. Some because it was school. We're using this room today because it's the last day of school, but in the fall, we have the bigger auditorium next door, but they still had to feed the kids lunch, and dismissal was after lunch. So a lot of the places I visited, we're still dealing with the fact that it was a school day, which makes a good reason why we shouldn't be, we should have a calendar that accommodates no school, no instruction on those days. I think that covers my general, we have, if I do the bills that we had passed, 3 of our bills were signed into law, which I think is a great item so far. We had Program Bill 1, which adds the 13th Judicial District to our statute. It's been, 8 years, I think, since since they created that judicial district, so now it's represented in statute. Our proposal number 6, which removes from the statute the outdated information for leasing paying more money to lease polling places that are accessible. It was something that should have come out when they passed the law that required all polling places to be accessible. So it kind of implies that some could not be accessible. And then the third that's signed into law already, we mentioned, is the outdated postal requirements. So those are 42, 43, and 44, the laws of this year. 3 others of our bills have passed both houses of the legislature and are waiting to be sent over. Our proposal number 4 eliminates the conflicting provisions in absentee ballot counting. It basically allows them to appoint additional inspectors at the end of the night to help count the absentee ballots at the polling place that are no longer allowed to be counted at the polling place. So our proposal is to remove that language from the statute, since it doesn't happen, it can't happen anymore. Bill number 10 that we had passed would allow for political committees to file electronic copies of their campaign political communications. Right now, the only way for them to do that is, give us the hard documents. So we have boxes of signs and things that are in all shapes and sizes. The third one is our bill number 14. It would allow for special ballots for voters during times of emergency for emergency responders to get a special ballot. It was one of the items that we saw in the hurricane response, that we just didn't have a way to get a ballot to an emergency responder, even though there was a state of emergency declared. So this bill would allow for that to happen. It would allow us, an applicant, to apply in different circumstances, but also to identify, like a military voter, that they could have their ballot sent either by fax or electronic means. So those 3 are pending being sent to the governor for consideration. So maybe we'll have 6 of our bills signed into law that were part of our package this year. Of course, the other one that's pending is the reform package that was not necessarily part of our proposal, but it was an executive program bill, and the Senate and the Assembly adopted it, and we're waiting to see those changes too.
Is that the independent expenditure bill?
That's in there. That's a Senate Bill 8160, Senate
more than that in that
10742. Well, it did a number of things. We have 3 parts. Part A is independent expenditures and coordination. B is segregated accounts. Part B of the bill is segregated accounts for party committee or constituent committee housekeeping. And Part C was the wind down provision after the death of a candidate.
The only one with an immediate effective date is the housekeeping segregation.
So those were all part of one bill?
Yeah, there was other Jacob
There are other
things
things in
Maloney
that too.
things in there.
I think that's the administrative side. I don't know if we want to do the other 2 also, IT now, or.
You can if you want. I mean, we're down to a final round of interviews for the new head of the IT department. And we continue to work on getting assistance through what's called program-based information technology services to help us finish the Nysboe project, the PBITS. And in addition, we're also seeking to have, because we have funding for contractors, is an additional program manager to assist the new that's one of the things that we lost when we changed vendors at the Nysboe project, so we're looking at hiring a new program, a new project manager to help make sure that that stays on track and organize that. So we expect both of them to come online in the next month, and we should finish our round of interviews with the head of IT. We're scheduling them for next week, so we should be making a decision shortly thereafter on that.
One of the items that Todd mentions is PBITS, is program, whatever the acronym stands for.
Program-based information.
It allows us to,
technology
it's supposed to be the state's streamlined process for obtaining a vendor to finish the Nysboe project. It's the resolution that's on your agenda for consideration under number D is for the funding support to be able to pay that vendor out of HAVA funds. It's supposed to be streamlined, and we've been working with our staff and OGS to come up with parameters so they can quickly get us the person to do the work, persons to do the work. So hopefully that will be a success.
What's the impact of this on the development of the new campus FIDUS system? I mean, I know we were targeting next year as a rollout of the new FIDUS system.
that's a good
for
question.
everybody. What do you think this is going to do to that timeline?
Well, as we stand today, we're still on that timeline because that's operating not with an outside vendor, but with what are called hourly-based information technology services. Those are on site already. We're seeking to have additional resources brought on to help keep that on target. If that doesn't come to pass within the next month,
If what doesn't come to
if we don't get that additional resources coming, which we have asked for, we've put in for, we just don't have yet. And we've ratcheted that up to both the ITS, which has an impact on that, the Governor's Office and Division of Budget. That could jeopardize that 2017 rollout. But what we have done over the prior year in the beginning part of the project is related to Nysboe to an extent, but it hasn't delayed it. It's developing the architecture and the hardware that it runs on, both here, or here at our data center, our new data center, and also our disaster recovery site. So the parts of that are in place. What's not in place is the programming that will run on that, and that's what we're supposed to be doing over the course of this year. If we don't get the additional programming, soon, you're right, it could jeopardize that deadline, and then we'd have to figure out, when you would launch that, because it's a matter of transitioning the existing filers over to a whole new rubric that they would have to comply with, because we're switching again from software-based filing, primarily software for most of the canons, to what is wholly a web-based filing system.
How long does that transition take? How long do you estimate that will take for the actual filers to transition into this new web-based system? Do you have a sense of how long that'll take? Or?
I don't know that we have a specific sense because, we're looking at doing it, in between large filings, and whether we do it with groups or not.
So would you switch everybody at
gotten that
once? Is that the idea, that everybody will switch over from what they're doing now to the new system all at one time? Or you'll do it in stages?
Well, it would end up being in stages. Because of the filing calendar, because they generally don't all file in 1 year or all at any time, so it would end up being in stages. But we were envisioning really because of the nature of the information, and the ability to continue to support the legacy system. We have to support the legacy data, but we're still supporting the legacy system, which is, it is a point of weakness in our current system. But we've mitigated to the extent that we can. But I think we almost have to bring everybody over at the same time because we can't really run both systems at once.
So what are we shooting for right now? Are you shooting for next July? Is that the goal?
I think we're too far away from being able to say with certainty, so I don't want to give you.
But is there a goal? That's all I'm asking. I understand you can't say with
having
certainty.
lost our project manager
Right.
and in the money to pay the bills is in the ITS budget. So we think there's more than adequate financial resources to get the job done. We've identified they're called HBITS workers. I don't know what that stands for, but it's the way we can get the contractors to come in and do the work. We have a team of people.
You're not
out-
answering the question.
Well, by having,
I can answer
we
the
need to
question.
get them here to be able to have a reliable date.
Well, I'm just
And I
looking
don't
for-
have
I'm
a
The
just looking for
last
a
date
goal
that
you're
was
working
told
with.
to the commissioners was January 7, 2017.
Yeah, I don't think that's a reliable date.
No,
Okay, so we're off January, are we on July then? Is that where we are, or?
my understanding is the beta would come somewhere in March,
Sorry, what's that, Bill? The what?
the beta of it.
Beta.
That's where you have an initial project that's running, you have a small sample group that will then take it for a test drive kind of a thing. and
So
then
the
work-
anticipation is to get some people on it, just see if it's working for a while.
In March,
I see,
right, I mean, we
see.
have people involved in the process now.
Okay,
So the beta, the original time frame was to have the beta for March, and then once the beta's up and running, to have the full implementation for the July of next year.
okay, so July right now is.
And as it
the-
stands now, I mean, that's still the goal, and I think that it's potentially attainable. The issue then becomes these other
have slippage.
unknowns, right? But the.
Well, I'd just like to be kept updated on that goal. I mean, if it keeps
Yes.
slipping, I'd like to know it, and, we can talk about it, but, because I'm working with dates, and maybe they're wrong, and I just like to.
Well, one of the items that we do have at resources readily available is we have the contract with NYSTAC that we use for 2 items, project management, and they also, his second contract was the access for the independent testing for the voting system software. So we still have an existing contract for project management, and we have met with them in an interim basis. We want to use that existing contract to bring them in to make sure that, to the extent possible, between Nysboe or Capus Fidus without a project manager right now, and the unit without having a director, that we can get their benefit of project management to make sure that we can minimize any slippage, if any. Because we know without having a vendor to finish Nysboe, with all of the HBITs are through ITS, so we have made the request. They have submitted the paperwork. It's been sitting for, I believe, over 3 weeks to get the approval. So the sooner we can get the approvals and get going with the employees, then we can have a more firm understanding that there won't be slippage.
And next year should be a good year because of it's an odd year.
Well, I assume that's why you're targeting next year, is it's an off year for us, so you don't have the volume and you don't have the. Makes sense. So if we slip into 18, it becomes a bigger burden on the agency, is that fair to say?
Not necessarily, I just think that it's just, our agency certainly have different focuses for ballot access in 2018 that you wouldn't have in 2017 because of the statewide election and for the legislature, so.
It won't be as bad as this year with 3 primaries and a general, but we would want to bring some additional resources on temporarily to help with the rollout, certainly, for that.
All right, so let's turn to the council's report. Kim Galvin and Brian Quayle.
Thank you, Commissioner. Since the last meeting, sort of a summary review of where we're at on pending cases. We have presently 7 cases that the Attorney General is representing us on. We have a total of 9 pending cases. One of them related to, which is on appeal, related to ballot access in the 3rd Congressional District. That is the sole remaining item left over with respect to ballot access for the federal primary. And we're pleased to report that the Campanello case, which involved a claim under NVRA and also a challenge to the open primary, rather to our closed primary system and to our voter registration, enrollment change deadline period, was dismissed recently. So that one has dropped off the boards. And we continue to monitor these cases and respond accordingly. Though the Attorney General is doing an outstanding job representing us, again, in 7 of them, it requires a great deal of agency effort to provide them with the tools that they need to be successful on our behalf, and we're working very hard to make sure that we do that. The Campaign Finance Unit is gearing up for the July 15th filing, which is coming up and is largely caught up with the compliance reviews, and keeping current with that, and we'll be getting a surge shortly. The legislative update that Mr. Brem gave indicates that 6 out of 19 bills that were proposed by the agency were either chaptered or passed by both houses, which is significant. The unit, obviously, during the course of the period since the last meeting, was engaged in being responsive to the Inspector General in their investigation, and we did quite a bit in that area. And that's the main summary. Do you have other things to?
No, just to briefly mention again that the Department of Justice attorneys will be here, so we've spent a lot of time preparing with the IT folks and trying to get a handle on things for them.
So they've already met with the city?
They have met with the city. We offered to go there, they said no. We offered to do a call, they said no. So they're coming. There's been obviously we had the primary, and since we last met with the calls that would surround that, we had an e-discovery training. Brian, Bill, and I to talk about e-discovery tools so that we can do them ourselves for these lawsuits that continue to come. And I think, other than the other cases, I would just mention the Eason case has taken a lot of staff time and meetings and things to work. Eason is a website accessibility issue.
Is that the Blind Association?
Yes, that is. And we work to bring our page into compliance with the standard that we're working towards. And again, it's another Attorney General matter that they're also representing the DMV in this, so it's caused a lot of coordination primarily for.
Have we made
Right.
changes to our website?
We have.
But it hasn't satisfied the suit as of yet?
Not as of yet.
I mean, I think if you look at the history, when the organization first reached out to the state board and wanted to meet with us and talk to us about improvements that we could make to the system, our preliminary response was we would meet, certainly we would want to make sure that the site was accessible, and we scheduled a meeting with them, et cetera, and it was really much on the eve of one of those meetings that they gave us a stipulation where they wanted to go to court. That didn't stop us from our internal review of desiring to make sure that our site is accessible to the public as it needs to be. And certainly we have done a number of items to allow screen readers to read it and to make forms that are accessible, and to make sure that we brought in, some tools that would help us to diagnostic review of what we have posted to the site, so that we could use those tools and see that we got a positive response. I think the underlying issue is the lawsuit is really to a different standard than the state standard. I don't think there's a disagreement on anyone that our desire to want to make sure that we all have information that's readily available. We continue to do that, and we will continue to do that. It's just a matter of what is the proper standard that we should. We're reviewing with DMV to the state standard. If there's some finding that it's a standard other than that, we'll have to work towards that understanding. But I think we've as we identify things that we could improve, we roll them out as quickly as we can.
That's it.
All right, then, election operations, Brendan Luvolo.
The petition started coming in yesterday, so that's been our big focus. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, and Thursday. We have, our staff worked with the county boards for the June primary, both getting their election night reporting together and setting everything up, also working with IT for the election night reporting. We have the Dominion upgrade that's going to be voted on this afternoon. We've also been continuing to work on the ES&S Phase 2 upgrade. And that's about it.
Any questions? Thank you, Brendan. Then we'll do public information, but I don't see,
Well,
They're both not here today.
okay.
I only have 2 items left that are on the list that Tom gave me. One, a reminder that the Department of Justice survey for the MOVE Act voters with regard to the federal June 28th primary, if they have not sent us their post-election survey, they were due today.
That's actually a notice to the county boards, I'm sure you don't have
For all
a
those
survey.
people listening. And the upcoming transmission deadline, 32-day for MOVE voters for the September primary. We want to remind people that that deadline is August 12th. We will send a reminder to all the counties. And last, there's been a little bit of change going back and forth with the federal Health and Human Services grant that we had applied for. They normally are a 5-year grant. They end on September 30th. HHS at the beginning of the year had decided they wanted to stop this one early and had sent to the states, you won't have access to this money. Several months earlier, it was more than 3 months earlier that they were going to end it. We provided that notice to the counties to make sure that they took any appropriate action, that they would not lose use of that money without them knowing it. So we had told them that. Just in the last week, we received word through the national associations that because of the concern throughout the country, HHS has gone back to the original deadline, but they kind of have a winding down process to make sure that you have your applications in. Since it's a refund program, you have to have all your paperwork in order to make sure it clears and the money can be paid by that deadline. So we have communicated to the counties that new deadline to make sure it's longer than we first told them, but if they're listening, it's July 29th. If they have not spent their money or applied for the voucher, if they did spend their money, that's the deadline in New York State to get the paperwork in, so we can reliably know that they will finish the process in time to get their funds. So to the extent the counties are listening, we wanted to use this opportunity for a public service announcement.
What's the status of the interstate voter registration?
That Tom did not give
pilot
me, but I know
projects?
those are some of the reasons why. I know he and John have talked about it. So if I could get you an
Okay,
email
well,
update, I apologize for that.
I will
didn't know
just
John
keep
would-
asking, just because if I don't ask, it seems to slip from the agency agenda. All right, and last but not least, Risa Sugarman, Enforcement.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The division continues to work, and I have nothing new to report to you.
All right, so then next on our agenda is old business, the discussion on political clubs.
I'll start on that one. And I'll start with a quick historical reprise. And what occurred is there were 2 drafts of answers to questions that Commissioner Kellner had posed in relation to political clubs, and some specific questions that were asked that were designed to provide, looking for some answers on those questions that would provide guidance to those entities, because while not totally unique, they do have special challenges oftentimes with regard to determining what side of the dividing line that they're on with respect to whether or not they have to make register with the state board as a political committee and or file. There are still presently 2 drafts of answers to those questions, although the answers themselves are generally the same. And the staff determined with the insight of the commissioners that one of, if perhaps not the major issue, is providing intelligible device to entities that are actually posed with making a decision as to whether or not they have to file with the state board. My Republican colleagues quite some time ago provided a draft of a document that was designed to categorize instances, examples of activities that would trigger a filing requirement, and instances of activities that might be common to political clubs based on actually some institutional insights that we've been getting not only from the commissioners with respect to political clubs, but as a result of our direct interactions with them in the trainings for political clubs that were held on Long Island and in New York City, both of which were requested by the commissioners, and we did. And then just recently, I provided a draft that added additional material to that. So the staff is continuing to work on that.
Not to interrupt you, but I think it might be helpful. I don't know if you showed your commissioners
Just
the
today.
draft just today.
I don't know if they had an opportunity to.
But to
look
show
at it.
you where we thought we could go to make a more intelligible document for easier advice for the club. So I think we're making
So,
what we wanted.
the question is there some agreement as to the form of the final product? Is it going to go into the manual? Is it going to be an advisory opinion or some separate distribution? And what's the schedule for how to get that accomplished, get that finished?
I think that the place that it would probably make the most sense, because we're not really groundbreaking in terms of the board's substantive position on these issues, and there are many opinions of the board on what is or is not a political committee. And perhaps if we wanted to, there could certainly be an opinion nonetheless that encapsulates them in this specific context. But inclusion in the manual, it probably makes the most sense. Also, a freestanding document for clubs that perhaps not only pulls together, Commissioner, what makes them a political committee or not analysis, but also then gives them everything that they need in one place to accomplish registering and filing should they come down on the yes side of this. And that's something also that the commissioners have encouraged us to do, which is to provide resources so that once someone decides they need to interact with this agency, they don't have to hunt for what they need, but it's provided to them in a way that's easy to find. So having, I think, come very close to resolving this first part of it, I don't think it's unreasonable that we cannot get to the rest of it before the next meeting. We have made substantial progress, we're just not completely done.
So, I'm sorry, your suggestion is to put it in the manual?
My suggestion is to put it in the manual. My suggestion also is that we come up with a document that once we've answered the question on, that once a club determines that they are a political club, that right there they would have the documents that they would need to file. Because there's certain choices that are made at the point at which you have to file, and some of those choices for clubs are clear. I mean, clearly they're not a party or constituted committee or some of these other things. So we could give them some specific guidance on what to do, and it would recognize the fact that because they're a club and not associated with a candidate, that their level of activity is less, potentially the level of sophistication is less, although certainly that would not be universally true, because the political part of their existence is only a small part of it, as opposed to a candidate who is totally in the business of raising money and expending money in relation to an election.
Yeah, my only comment on this, I guess, is that I know this is directed to political clubs, and you know, my understanding is they are largely located in New York City, and I think there's a lot of them along Long Island. I don't think upstate has the number of I'm not aware of a large number of political clubs, so-called, in upstate. I do think that what I saw here this morning, though, would apply to entities that aren't necessarily calling themselves political clubs, but might be acting in that same way. And that this advice, to me, is broader in the sense that if any entity is acting in these ways, I think this would be guidance to them as to whether or not they are now a political committee under the law or not. So while this is being labeled a political club advice, I think it's broader than that, in that it would be advice to other entities that maybe don't call themselves that. So, limiting this to a political club advice, to me, it seems to me it's broader than that, that's all. So I don't know if we need to relabel it or not, but I just would suggest that this could be used by other organizations besides what are called political clubs.
Sure.
So people should be aware of that, in my view. However we couch this or wherever it ends up, I think it's useful, helpful to anybody that's acting in these ways around the state of New York.
Okay. So thank you for the update, and we'll carry that as old business on the next agenda. So, first item of new business is the vote on the opinion on the impact of the Hispanic Leadership Fund case. The opinion is designed simply to publish as a formal opinion what we have already adopted in resolutions as directives from the commissioners regarding enforcement of these regulations. My understanding is the draft has been widely circulated, including to the Attorney General, and incorporates everybody's comments. Am I correct on that, Kim? And
The draft was not circulated to the Attorney General. The draft, the prior two versions of it were circulated to the Attorney General, and I spoke specifically with the representative of the Solicitor General's office on the substance previously, but no, we did not share this draft with the.
well, you're talking about the final text, but the original.
The Board of
yes.
Opinions were,
Oh, absolutely. Both the prior directives
or policies,
and where we were at, and were shared, and I did specifically speak with.
Because my understanding has always been that the AG has signed off on this.
That is absolutely correct in terms of the substance of what is here, because they specifically indicated to us that they shared this opinion.
Okay. All right. So those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The resolution's adopted. Next is the adoption of the regulation to amend Part 6210, Subdivision 2, on routine maintenance and testing of voting systems. My understanding is that we have not received any comments since it was published.
Correct.
And this would reduce the number of testing cycles required now that we have experience with the machines and we're comfortable that we don't need the additional cycle. All right, those in favor of permanently adopting the regulation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The regulation's adopted. Next is the resolution on Microsoft support services. This is required under the legislature's requirement that the commissioners vote separately on any expenditure of HAVA funds. And Bob and Todd already described this in their report.
This is, so it's about, it's approximately 50,000 cheaper than last year. With the change to the system, for this support, it used to only be Nysboe. Now it's our entire system, so the portion of the system that's supported under the state side is paid for out of state budget. So we've reduced substantially the federal HAVA exposure, so you were only paying a portion which is related to Nysboe out of federal.
And this is just $36,285.
Saving $50,000 out of the federal side.
Those in favor say aye.
I'm recusing myself.
Okay. So we'll note that Commissioner Spano recused himself. The next resolution is to authorize $550,000 from HAVA funds for the Nice Voter Refresh Project, also described in the co-executive director's prior report. After we spend down this money, how much HAVA money will be left?
It's
Still-
the interest that's in there is approximately $3 million, I believe, but it's a moving target with Division of Budget and the Office of General Service.
Between 3 and 4 million, but it does change a little bit depending on the interest calculation.
It's actually still one of the largest amounts in the country that's still unspent on HAVA funds.
Well, when you add it to the county share, that's what really puts us over the top.
Right. At national meetings, they talk about how New York still has HAVA money left. But that's because we've been frugal with it and effective with it. And I always say that we may not have been the first to spend our HAVA money, but we were the first to spend it right. Okay, so the resolution, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, it's adopted unanimously. All right, next is the certification of the Dominion Ballot Consolidation Utility for use with the Dominion Election Management System version 4.9.17.0. Bob, in one paragraph, can you tell us what this consolidation utility does?
Sure. What this does, it allows the counties to generate their election day and their absentee ballots within one election database, and then read the results from both systems back into that one database instead of creating two databases and combining the results.
So this particular utility does not affect the actual voting portion of the election management system. Is that correct?
This utility runs while you're creating the election.
And so it doesn't affect the casting of the vote or the recording of the vote itself. So our procedures are not quite as comprehensive in the testing and evaluation as required for the vote casting certification, correct?
Well, we put it through some extensive testing. It went through the dual source code review and all, just because it does work with the database of the EMS system.
Okay, good.
I have
And we do have a detailed report that we received prepared by the Elections Operations Unit.
I just have a question. This is the Dominion system that's doing it. Is the SNS doing the same, or is their operation system different?
There's allows you, well, actually what we're doing now is going through that process with the SNS of doing for.
They're doing the
last
same
minute
upgrade as, or similar upgrade? as
Well,
to-
there's similar changes to it, to allow last minute changes and whatnot for the system. But this only affects the Dominion counties that have the central count system.
And how many of those are there?
There's 16 of them have it, but I think there's only 15 using it.
All right, those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, resolution is adopted. All right, next is the discussion on the Inspector General's report. Todd or Bob?
Well, we've had a number of conversations, certainly in the building, with regard to the report, and certainly we are undertaking to review our procedures, and once we have a agreement as to what the procedures are, to provide instruction to the staff and what the proper procedures are, and to also provide both physical security for that process. I know we have had a number of conversations with the staff as to what we think would be an appropriate process. We've shared some draft ideas with each other. We've had a number of conversations. A draft was shared with enforcement. I know Todd and I and Risa had a meeting about a week or so ago just to have a general conversation about a process that would be well understood and something that we can follow. So in a process that is clear that from the moment that a document is created to whenever something is, in the world of cases, if it's closed, does it become public, does it not, and in what way? So clearly we want a comprehensive review so that we can at least deal with the parameters of when documents fall into a category that distribution needs to be restricted, and certainly how does that interact when the public or the press has filed a FOIL, and what are the appropriate guidelines to give to staff. I don't believe we have a specific recommendation for you yet, other than certainly your views are the most important to adopt a policy. We have a requirement to respond to the Inspector General, certainly in the broad parameters of a comprehensive review, to limit, to have a full understanding and to make sure that all of the staff in the building understand what that policy is, and then certainly to follow that policy with both physical restriction on distribution of whatever documents are determined to be not in wide distribution, I think is the general. Todd, if you have a...
No, I think that's accurate. I mean, we certainly raised awareness with the staff of the issue about sensitive documents, and just and then what we're at this point now is getting a policy that would then specifically train the staff on those documents as they work through a process, what happens to them if they change over time from sensitive to now releasable documents, and what categories those fall into. And that's, we've certainly shared drafts among the staff here. As Bob said, certainly a copy to Risa for her to review. And that's, what we're working towards.
As I understand it, a response is due to the IG
45 days from the date of the report, which would be the 15th of July.
So that'll be the end of this week. You have to file something with the IG.
Something, yes.
And we don't have anything you're telling me that is definitive that we can give them as a report, or what's your expectation there?
Well, I think there's one question that the public is going to want to know, which is, has the board taken any action with respect to John Connolly?
Well, you know what, that's a personnel issue, and I think if we want to discuss that, that should be discussed,
Well, I don't want to discuss it. I thought we've already discussed it.
We did, but I think that remains a personnel issue, and that's where it should remain.
So
There's no.
So you don't want to announce what
No, I
the
don't.
board has done?
I would really strenuously.
Well, do you
object
want to
that.
announce that the board did something?
Yes. I would say that action was taken.
Because I think that's...
Do it. All right, let me just
Greg,
say.
I didn't want to take you by surprise, okay? The point was just, what is the announcement that we're going to make with respect to the response to the Inspector General's report?
Well, I believe that.
I didn't mean to take you
Okay.
by surprise. I'm
We've
sorry.
already told them. They asked.
Pardon?
They asked. We already told them what action was taken.
The IG, you mean?
Yeah.
Just so there's a full understanding as far as that end of it's concerned. The thing that concerns me is that, obviously we've gone back and forth on a couple of this. Staff has gone back and forth on a couple of things as far as a policy that we should adopt, whether we adopt it today or whatever, which I thought, frankly, was pretty close. then I believe you had some questions regarding it, you know.
I did
that's the que-
circulate I hope my memo got
It did.
circulated.
It did.
Which was just a very short piece.
And we've seen a draft of something, which I think the staff has put together, which, I mean, we've talked about it, and we feel comfortable that we feel comfortable with what the staff's put together as far as a proposed policy that the agency can adopt. I think we're prepared to move forward on something, if you are.
Commissioner Mayor?
Let me
Try
say,
to adopt
let me
something.
say something just before you do, Lisa. Is that, you know, I understand some of the sensitivities with respect to enforcement has been presented to us by Ms. Sugarman, but and I frankly, in a perfect world, you know, operating somewhat in a vacuum, I would say, hey, confidential is confidential, you know, and you know, I think that was a solid policy. However, when you look at it and you examine it, the underpinnings there are not only weak, they're non-existent legally. There's nothing within the statute that says defines confidentiality. As a matter of fact, the courts have put forth a list of things. There are 18 of them statutorily listed as confidential records, and this is not one of them. Period. So the question then is, how do we handle it so that it satisfies some of what RISA has wanted, and yet some of what I think the board has wanted? That, you know, certainly within an investigatory situation, keeping things you know, from being foiled, I think is appropriate. As a matter of fact, that is covered. But to say that, you know, something, for instance, that RISA may mark this is confidential, there's no legal basis for that. You know, no matter how you cut it, it's not statutory. So how do we overcome that? And I thought what had been presented to us, as far as incorporating as much of it as we can with the legal underpinnings there, I think frankly has been done. And I think, you know, and I don't think Ms. Sugarman will want that or agree with it, but I think that's the best we can do under the circumstances. And I may be wrong, but I certainly stand to be corrected. Certainly that's a point of discussion.
Let Risa go, and then I'll have some comments.
Commissioners, I was given this proposed policy 24 hours ago. I've not had the time or the chance to process the contents or conduct a legal analysis to determine whether it is appropriate in scope or consistent with the law that created my independent division or position within the Board of Elections. I cannot at this time opine on the draft, and therefore I'm asking the board to table this discussion until I've had the opportunity to conduct a thorough legal analysis of what you have presented. This proposal will have significant ramifications for my division, the prosecutors' offices that receive referrals, citizens who file complaints, and the subjects of those complaints. The proposal seeks to advance the issues raised in the Inspector General's report, whether by policy or formal regulations, deserves reflection and analysis. And I must say, Commissioner, I disagree with you and your evaluation of what the law is. Statute only does not decide what is confidential. Case law as well decides that. And there is a full body of case law about what is confidential and is not. And I am therefore asking this board not to make a decision today and not to discuss this proposed policy today. There has not been time for me or for my attorneys to have reviewed what you are proposing or what is contained in this. There is a case that is cited in this proposal that doesn't stand for what it says it stands for, and there are significant cases that have been decided over the years about law enforcement investigations that are contrary to what you have just said and what is listed in this report. So I would ask this board to table this discussion until I have had the opportunity to review not only your scope of this policy and in terms of my division and my independence in my division, but what's contained in here and how you are going to treat my documents and my investigations.
As I said from the outset, again, going right back to the principle of it, I agree with you. I certainly do. And I would look forward to you're giving me some legal backup on that.
And
If that's the case, I have no problem with it whatsoever.
And I intend to do that, but 24 hours is certainly
Well, Risa,
not.
to be fair, though, I mean, to be fair
Hasn't
about
been
that,
just
you haven't had
24
24
hours.
hours. You've had 6 weeks to do this. Let's be fair about this. IG's report came out weeks
I
ago.
understand that,
You
but
may have
this
just got, you may
policy-
have just got something from this agency that set out some position. But to be fair, if you have a position, which apparently you do, I think to be fair to us, you need to share whatever you have with us rather
And I
than
will do
holding
that.
it and not, well, I
And I will
haven't,
do
I have
that.
not seen anything from
But-
you as a proposal of what you think is the appropriate way to handle this or the legal pinnings for that. So to be fair to us, we have a report that needs to be responded to by the 15th, which we all knew. And it's important for this to be done timely. So I think to be fair to us, you need to share with us, if you have this information, which apparently you do, you should share with us what are these opinions that, or these court cases that you're citing, and what is your opinion on how this should be handled?
Commissioner, the fact that you and or the staff submitted a draft policy, 7 days before it was due, is not my responsibility. If this policy had been submitted in a
It
timely
isn't?
fashion to
Why
me,
isn't it your responsibility?
well, you were directed, your staff was directed to respond to the Inspector General, not me. I made this complaint, the Inspector General responded, investigated, determined who leaked that document, and directed
That's not
your...
true. That's not a correct characterization of the facts as you know it, and you know it. The person that made the thing came forward long before we were all put under oath.
I was not privy to what
Yes.
happened before the Inspector General's investigation. No one has spoken with me, Ms. Galvin, about what took place in the Inspector General's investigation. That was a confidential investigation. I read the report when it was issued, just like you. No one told me how it was conducted other than my staff was interviewed, just like the staff of the Board of Elections was interviewed. Nothing was shared with me about that investigation. No one from the board shared anything with me. No one shared information
ask?
with me.
Like you did in the original disclosure when you sent the email asking who released it, you changed your whole policy with regard to the disclosure of this information where you simply, the last time it happened, you simply sent an email. This time you made a complaint to the Inspector General's office.
Wait. I made a complaint when a document was leaked to the press about a confidential investigation that was being handled by the district attorney and the U.S. Attorney's Office. A confidential document because I got a call from a reporter who said they had my confidential document. That's what prompted my complaint.
Well, listen, I'm not sure it's helpful to rehash this. What we're trying to do, Risa, is we're trying to move forward on this.
I agree, and
We're
I
trying
wish
to
we
work with
could.
you. We're trying to work with you on this, but you need to share with us.
And I will
your-
be happy to do that.
Well, then you need
Commissioner.
to do that,
Can you
though.
give us a
So you
date
can give
certain
us.
that you can have this?
We are doing the research. We worked all day yesterday on it, but it doesn't mean that we can do it and present it to you in 24 hours.
They
I
didn't know the
understand. Will
statutory
it take
underpinning
4
6
weeks,
weeks ago.
3 weeks?
I don't think it'll take 4 weeks. No, we're working
Risa,
on it as
I guess what I'm trying to understand is why you didn't provide this to us 3 weeks ago.
because I didn't have a
You-
draft 3 weeks ago.
Without the
Commissioner.
without the draft, Risa, we would like your thoughts on what you think the legal obligation of this agency is vis-a-vis your work product.
And if
I
I
think
had-
it's helpful to us if you can provide that to us.
I would be happy to
I don't
do
think
that.
why it should take a document being shared by us for it to prompt you to do that.
Well,
That's
quite
all.
frankly, I didn't know that anyone was working on it until I had a meeting last week with Todd
Oh,
and
come
Bob.
on, we're not operating in a bubble here, everybody knows that. That's, come on,
Well,
that's
I just wanna go back-
disingenuous, it really is.
Well,
You know, you got plenty
I'm
of
sorry,
time. It
Commissioner,
doesn't-
but it's a condition in which I've been working for 2 years.
By choice.
Well, I don't think that's true.
By choice. You know, you should be part of this team. If you have, when I say part of this team, certainly there's the things that are sacrosanct as far as you're concerned, which I respect. But you're still part of this organization, the New York State Board of Elections. And as such, you have a responsibility, just like each of the commissioners has a responsibility, to have input
You had 6 weeks to have input. If you had something that was bothering you, you should say, gentlemen, this is what I suggest. This is what I want to do. This is how I need the protection, and I hope that you will go along with this. And you submit that to the staff. They have something to chew on, and then today we would have had something on the table to vote on. Now, that being said, I think we should just cut this thing short, end the story. We'll give you some time to get this thing done, and we'll put it over.
Thank you.
How much time do you need?
I don't know how much time I'll need.
Less than 4 weeks.
Absolutely less than 4 weeks.
Okay. Let's talk about our next meeting.
We have to submit a report on this.
Listen, I just have two quick things I want to say about
Get
this.
an
all right?
extension.
One is that
Just say what happens.
the Inspector General's report reminded me that back, I think in 2008, we were, the commissioners, and I think I'm the only one who goes back to them, although Peter was on staff then, was presented with revisions to the employee manual. And those revisions were never adopted. I think we were having trouble reaching consensus on some of the issues. But there are other issues in the employee manual that I think we need to, first of all, I was kind of surprised that we're in fact distributing the document, and apparently it has had revisions in it because, for example, it refers to JCOPE, which was not in existence in 2008. So somehow or other, the employee manual has changed without approval of the commissioners. And I was not aware of that. And I, kind of defending the rights, the prerogatives of the commissioners here, that should not have happened. And I don't believe that it's lawfully implemented because we explicitly voted not to change it the last time it was considered by the commissioners. So I think we need to re-examine the entire manual. Some of the issues that I think we need to at least discuss are some of the ethical rules on the restrictions of political activities of board employees. So we draw the line, and we know exactly what those lines are. And I think perhaps we all agree that board employees should not be running for political office. But it doesn't, we need to actually look at the rules and come to consensus, or at least define what we don't agree to. And as far as I'm concerned, the manual that is being currently given to the employees is not a lawfully approved manual by the commissioners. And that the changes that have been introduced since 2008 need to be approved by the commissioners.
Look at that.
All right, so that's one thing.
I thought that was two.
The other thing, which I will put off my long speech on principles of election administration, but I do believe that the campaign finance disclosure system is an integral part of election administration, and therefore, for me, there are 4 overriding principles of election administration that need to be applied. They are accuracy, uniformity, transparency, and verifiability. And that I think that it applies to whatever confidentiality policy we adopt. And I have a very long preparation on this that addresses it point by point and sort of expands on the issues that I raised in the email that was circulated last week. And I do feel very strongly that we need greater transparency, verifiability, and uniformity, both in the functions of the compliance unit and in the functions of the enforcement unit, that need to be addressed in the confidentiality policy.
Well, then there are two worlds, one of which what you're talking about, Commissioner, and one of which Ms. Sugarman is talking about. And you know what? If 4 weeks go by and that hasn't been shared so that each one knows what the other's doing so that we can come out with a solid, agreeable policy,
then we'll have wasted our time. So there's got to be an open door here for staff to talk, and you got to respond to staff as far as we are concerned, who will be preparing some of these things. So it can't be just that you sit in your section over there and crank something out to spring on us on that date. I think it has to be shared so that it can be properly vetted. Simple as that.
Okay,
So I assume that in the report you're gonna give to the Inspector General's office, we're just gonna incorporate what we just said.
Either that, or you would ask for an extension to present something properly. That's all.
Oh, just tell them what
The
we've
world's
done
not going
to
to
the-
fall
up to
apart
the
because we don't have
present.
something
Can
in
we do
there.
that? Just say what we've done.
Well, certainly Todd and I will submit whatever you wish us to submit, but from my perspective, I was not sure what would come out of the discussion today, so I figured we would focus on, we are doing a comprehensive review of what our policy should be, but assuming that one is adopted soon, what are we doing in the long run to protect that which you determine should be protected from inadvertent disclosure, and once that's completed, to educate the staff to know what are the policies, and for those people who don't have access to it, if they...
Well, I assume some of that's been done already. I mean, again, we don't operate in a vacuum here, so I assume staff has been spoken with, and anything that comes down the pike at this juncture should be shared with just a few people.
Right.
Simple as that. I mean, as far as a stopgap, but I mean, from that point on, yes, what are we doing in the future? Yeah, certainly educational things have taken place.
Well, Ms. Sugarman said she would not share any more documents until we've adopted a policy,
All
so
right.
we haven't got any new documents to limit the distribution on. And obviously, as I said earlier, we made, the staff is fully aware of the issue, so not to.
Okay.
And any documents we currently have, I don't know that, from my perspective, from what we had proposed, I think we already limit the distribution. Certainly, we have purchased some additional security cabinets that we could, whatever we think you might adopt as a policy, but until then, when we get the cabinets, we're making sure we have something we develop will need to have security. Certainly the board's determinations with regard to enforcement actions and the paperwork, we want to make sure that are not in an unsecure way.
all right.
Okay for the next meeting?
Our date to certify for the state primary is Monday, August 8th. If the conference for the Election Commissioners Association is the 1st through the 4th in the Thousand Islands area of the state.
So our choices are the 4th, 5th, or the 8th.
I have the 5th and the 8th.
That's fine with me, either one.
Either one.
I prefer the 5th, but the 8th is okay.
I don't care.
Will the
I
work be
think the
done by
5th is marginally better for me, too. But
I'm sorry, the 5th is? Well, do you want to pick the 5th?
if we do the 5th, then I'm going to stay in Albany
Got it.
and not make a
Oh,
round
okay.
trip from
right.
Alexandria Bay.
Got it.
If we pick the 8th, I would.
All right, then, that's
Up in
inconvenience. The
Lakewood.
5th is fine.
Are you gonna be up there?
I'm not going to be able to, no.
Oh, so then you don't
So I'll
have
be
that
coming up,
problem of
no.
going all the way
I'll
up
just
there
have to
and
come
come
up
back
here.
up, yeah.
Fifth?
So the 5th is fine.
5th is
I'll
good.
do that, yeah.
Okay. And if something comes up, the 8th is sitting.
Right, no problem.
Well,
Well, I
the
think the
only thing
goal
is-
should be for staff to try to finish by the 5th. If they don't finish by the 5th, then we'll have to do a telephone meeting on Monday.
In addition to the 5th, you mean, for the outstanding?
Or we'll change the date.
Okay.
Yep, I think we can accommodate you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so are we ready to adjourn?
I think we are.
Meeting is adjourned.